Dr. Verwoed. Dr. Verwoed, thank you for joining us. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Mandla. Thank you for the opportunity.
Working with the TRC was a mammoth task which really kept you on your toes 24/7, I presume?
Yes. It was quite a time. The mid-90s was obviously a very interesting time in our country's history as well, but then to actually be within the TRC in the Cape Town office, working sort of close to the coalface of the whole process was a really challenging experience.
You are currently coordinating and facilitating the Beyond Dehumanization Reflective Learning Project with ex-combatants and survivors from Northern Ireland, Israel, Palestine, and South Africa. That is another big job.
Yes. Well, in some ways, I think the experience within the TRC prepared the ground for that work. I became very interested in particularly people who were actively involved in political violence, and obviously from an Afrikaner point of view, I was really drawn to try and understand and work with people who came from this particular community. But then I got an opportunity to work a bit internationally and in Northern Ireland in particular. And some of the themes that I've picked up in South Africa started to come up there as well, and then in Israel and Palestine too, and then even with veterans in America. So I think at a human level, I'm more and more interested in really the human cost of war and how we can find ways to transform that.
And also trying to help us understand how important it is for us to understand the whole issue around forgiveness and giving back people their lives, as it were, after paying their dues to society.
Well, I mean, I've actually become quite cautious about speaking about forgiveness, especially also given my background in the South African context. But also in Northern Ireland and in other places, I've seen people become very cautious, when that word is being used, because sometimes for some it has religious connotations. For others, it means that people have to first really acknowledge the wrongdoing and really make practical amends before you can start using that word. And I think that really does open a real challenge for us in South Africa even today. And that's why I'm very cautious about, speaking about that.
It has become an emotional word to use.
Emotional, and especially, I mean, imagine if you've experienced deep loss, and so many people in South Africa have not really had an opportunity like those who were within the TRC to even be acknowledged morally and emotionally. And then there's all the practical questions of people needing to take responsibility, especially in the white community, people who are beneficiaries of apartheid, people who were supporters like myself. I think there's a huge question around how do we take real responsibility before we even begin to talk about, the need for people to forgive and move on.
This is where we battle to find each other.
Come again?
This is where we battle to find each other.
Exactly. I think for me, there's a temptation 20 years after 94, that people can become a bit bogged down in current politics and can point out things like, corruption and crime. And those are real issues, but it actually can become a way to deflect from what I believe is the real challenge. And that is that we still really have to address the legacy of apartheid. And tragically, we are still living separate lives. And there's a lot of work that, especially, I believe, white South Africans and Afrikaners have to do to really listen and reach out and take responsibility in a creative way. I'm not saying people should go and sit in a corner and feel bad about themselves or take on some kind of legal guilt. But I think at a very human level, I think we need to do much more, I believe, to reach out to fellow black South Africans and listen and learn really what has been the reality of the system and what has been the continuous legacy for people in their lives, and before we start pointing fingers at whatever might be wrong in politics.
Before you answer this question, Doctor, I just wanted you to think around someone like you who wants to extend a hand to black South Africans to, reconcile things. I wonder how many other people within the white Afrikaner community agree with you. Is that growing? Is that community growing?
Well, I mean, I would be very cautious to make statements on behalf of other people. I'm trying to speak sort of really from my own point of view. But I do believe, I think sometimes it's a case of finding perhaps the language. When you say to somebody you have to apologize, you have to say sorry, you have to take responsibility. For some people, that means they really have to go on a journey where they begin to question their beliefs, where they begin to question their parents, the things that they sort of believed in, and they even their grandparents. I grew up during the time when the Anglo-Boer War was still alive in terms of people's sense of loyalty to the past. So I've come to believe that this issue of people almost being afraid to betray their own loved ones or their own beliefs becomes a block that sometimes comes across as indifference or arrogance. But if we can find creative ways for people to come together, and especially where people can listen and hear the stories from fellow black South Africans in particular, then I believe there is still a lot of big-hearted people who at the moment I think it's a bit guarded because of perceptions around politics, issues around crime and so on. And unfortunately this kind of media tendency to almost present beneficiaries from the past or those who support us now as victims of the new South Africa. So you then get embroiled in this kind of victim Olympics, who are really the victims, and that doesn't really get us anywhere.
13 minutes past 7 on SAfm, South Africa's news and information leader, Dr Wilhelm Verwoed, our guest, talking about the questions of reconciliation, accountability and parole for apartheid crimes. I'll ask him about that in a moment. Stay with us.
It's a whole new world on SABC2. Tonight, catch Dream School at 7 p.m, Mali at 7:30 p.m, Sutu Tswana News at 8:30 p.m, Mubango at 9 p.m, and the repeat of Gospel Classics at 9:30 p.m. It's your new world on SABC2. Follow us on Twitter or like our Facebook page to get all the updates on the changes.
We're keeping the newness coming this month on SABC3 by bringing you more exciting lineups of shows and movies, from local shows like Time and Cheek, Extra X Factor, and Narvik, to unmissable international shows like Dream Machines, The Flitzer, Supernatural, Dr. Oz, and Survivor. We're even bringing you more of your all-time favorite weekend movies. You'll be sure to have something to keep you entertained whenever you tune in this spring. Find something fresh this month only on SABC3.
The Talk Show.
14 minutes past 7. Thank you for staying with us. 0891 104 207. SMSs at 34701 at a cost of £2. Any thoughts, comments, concerns, worries, please do share them with us. So, Dr. Verwoed, recently the names Eugene de Kock and Clive David Lewis come to mind. Applications were made to the parole board, one on medical grounds and the other one normal parole, as it were, and that seems to divide people. Some people are saying let them go, some people are saying no. 20 years later, where do we stand? How do you see it?
Well, of course, I have to be very careful because I didn't personally suffer at the hands of the people we're talking about. In fact, I was a supporter. So from my point of view, I have quite a different relationship to Eugene de Kock than I would have to Clive Darby Lewis. And part of it is because I had the opportunity within the TRC to meet Eugene de Kock when he was busy with his amnesty application. And I just was struck by the fact that he was actually willing to acknowledge, the wrong of what he did, that he had a sense of politically, being conditioned and so on, and that he was willing also to meet the victims of his actions, and I met him a second time because I wanted to talk to him about what is he willing to do from a point of view of restitution and reparation. And he talked about what he would like to do and how he would get involved in demining operations, and to me those were important signs that he was on a journey and that there was something there that you could work with. And what I've heard subsequently through my work with Professor Pumla Gobodo-Madikizela, who really did a lot of work with de Kock, and other people who've also told me the role that he's played, for example, in prison to help one of the Worcester bombers, Stefans, I think is his surname, how he helped him also to come to a recognition of the wrong of what he was involved in and to do something about it. So for me, he has played a constructive active role during the TRC process. He's been on a journey of facing up to the wrongs of what he did, and there's a willingness to approach the victims, and he's made encouraging noises about reparations. And those things for me would be important considerations. And then of course there's also for me the wider point, and that is really what I said to Eugene de Kock when I met him, is that a part of me felt as an Afrikaner who benefited from the actions of the security forces that I almost had to apologize to him for the way in which Afrikaner leaders, political leaders, church leaders, community leaders were scapegoating conveniently somebody like de Kock, and that we were not willing as a community at that time and as political leaders to share responsibility with people like him, and that there was for me something really wrong about him carrying the can, as it were, and becoming the scapegoat, and that people can point to him as, primeval and all these terrible things, but in the process actually distance ourselves from him as a human being. And that to me, all those things that I've just mentioned actually would make me argue that I think he should get parole on those grounds, but obviously I can't speak on behalf of the people who have suffered so much at his hands.
Indeed, because there's always the question of people who have been missing ever since, have never been found. There's no information available, but their whereabouts.
Well, I hope, I think, the impression I got from his amnesty application, his evidence even in mitigation during the criminal trials, and what I've heard subsequently, is that he would go out of his way to provide information that would be helpful, and perhaps put pressure on people to do that. The story is very different for me when it comes to Clive Darby Lewis, because I do not have the same sense from him that I have of de Kock, in terms of a willingness to really face up to what he did and to take some responsibility for it and do something about it. And for me, if I was a victim or a survivor of his actions, it would just be like rubbing salt into wounds all the time. To even think about, letting him go. Although on compassionate grounds, of course, the medical thing is something to consider, but I can understand at the sort of human level that people would probably feel quite different, as I do, between those two cases. And I think, for me, the big issue is shared responsibility, and I don't think it's right that, one or two individuals should be, painted as the real culprits and the real scapegoats. And many other people have been released. And I just have this, view that I think de Kock should also be released.
19 minutes past 7 on SAfm, South Africa's news and information leader. Obviously, we just touched on two people, Clive W. Lewis and Eugene de Kock, and obviously from the liberation movements, people will say there are other people from other movements who are behind bars. Are we looking at them? Why are we making so much noise about that? Your calls on 0891 104 207 in a moment.
We know you love good live music, yet you don't always have time to go out to shows. We say parks and clubs are not the only places where you can get your groove on to your favorite artists on stage. All you need is your TV set, couch, remote control, and maybe a blankie.
3, 4.
Catch Afro Cafe every Wednesday at 10 p.m. as we celebrate 20 years of the best South African jazz, Afro pop, soul, and all your other favorite genres. Hear it, feel it, live it, only on SABC2.
If your business doesn't have an Opticon PBX system from Telkom Business, your customers are probably used to this sound. Because the average telephone line doesn't have the ability to split one line into two, or conference calling facilities. Get an affordable Opticon PBX system for your business with flexible finance options and free maintenance on a rental option. Call 10217, visit telkom.co.za/business, or go to a Telkom shop, and you'll see why we're the right business for your business. T's and C's apply.
21 minutes past 7 on SAfm. The Department of Labour invites heads of departments, senior EE, transformation managers, employment equity forum members, trade unions and HR practitioners to attend employment equity roadshows advocating critical areas in the Employment Equity Amendment Act of 2013 and the amended Employment Equity Regulations of 2014, including a practical demonstration of the EE online reporting facility for 2014 reporting period. The roadshows are at the Centurion Lake Hotel in Pretoria on Tuesday, the 12th of August, and at the Centum Convention Center on Wednesday, the 13th of August. Both of them are from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. Now, the contact persons for this are Miss Julian Mohale and Miss Maditsi Mulani. The telephone number 012-309-4539 or 012-309-4331.
The Talk Show.
Still chatting to Dr. Wilhelm Verwoed, who worked with the TRC between 1995 and 1998, currently coordinating and facilitating a Beyond Dehumanization reflective learning project with ex-combatants and survivors from Northern Ireland, Israel, Palestine, and of course South Africa. As you can hear, he's very cautious about certain things in as far as speaking on behalf of other people, expressing his views there. In as far as the other liberation movements, other people who could have been seen to have committed apartheid crime, are you hearing the same concerns, Doctor?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's obviously not such a high-profile discussion as the two we've just referred to, and that in itself is interesting. I know that there are people who feel very aggrieved that their cases are not being given the same, political legitimacy as some of the other organizations that have been through the process. And I've also seen this internationally, that sometimes groups that have been more on the margins, as it were, of the mainstream liberation groups, sometimes politically find it more difficult afterwards to present their case and to be heard and to be treated in the same way. But I also, I would be honest, I don't know enough detail about specific cases and why those are actually not being treated in the way that others have. Because on the surface, you would like to think that people would be treated the same in terms of if they can show the political nature of their actions. There might have been technicalities around why they didn't go through amnesty or why, for some reason, it's not treated in the political sense.
It's only come up to 24 minutes past 7 on SAfm. Let's chat to Kristen in Cape Town. Good evening, Kristen. Thanks for calling.
Good evening. How are you?
Well, thanks. How are you?
I'm okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I would like to acknowledge the way this gentleman is speaking. Is quite a way that shows appreciation of other people and also how other people feel. Those people who lost their relatives, who don't know where they are even up to now, whether they were buried, whether they were thrown into the acid or what. It is very difficult for one to close that chapter when you don't know where your relative is. I wish these gentlemen who are in prison, if they could come up and maybe tell people where different people who went missing are, and more people who are out there who knows more about these people who are quiet should come up and tell people what they did with those people. Then actually there will be a reasonable grounds for amnesty. But when they don't give information, well, it's something else. It's difficult for those people who suffer to continue to suffer. You suffer losing someone, then you are pressure put on you to forgive. That's my contribution. Thank you.
Thank you, Kristen. Kristen in Cape Town. 0891-104-207. SMSs at 34701. Dr. Verwoed, one wonders, why is it difficult for many people to just tell it like it is? Because one would love to believe that one's freedom is more important than what has happened in the past. Tell people and get the opportunity to move on. What's holding those people back in this situation?
Yeah, I think, I know there has been discussions around extending, opportunities for people to come forward who didn't make use of the TRC process, and also opening up the lists in terms of people who didn't get a chance to testify as victims. I don't know if there is a way to come up with a creative incentive for people to come forward with that kind of information, which the previous caller referred to, which I agree. And again, internationally, this is a major question. How do we get people who are a part of, especially security forces, state agents, who would be very difficult to prosecute through the normal legal channels, but they have this vital information. And people are desperate to find out what happened to their loved ones. And in Northern Ireland, this is a very hot discussion at the moment. It's the same question. How do we provide an incentive so that people can come forward with that truth without worrying about being prosecuted necessarily, or worrying about their families and their children who will be stigmatized because of them coming out in public. So in the Northern Irish context, which is the one where I've worked very recently, they are looking for creative ways to give people almost like protected, confidential spaces where they can meet people who are survivors and victims, give them the information so that they can put their relatives through dignified burials, know what happened to them, without people feeling that they will be targeted as a result or be prosecuted. Because otherwise, why would they then come forward, you know?
Also, you wonder if it shouldn't be the families who have lost, who have private meetings and are told the truth and it ends there. Maybe the public will not agree with that because the suffering is collective.
That's the dilemma. Yeah, I mean, and that's again, it's part of the big debate, not just here, in other places too, is the need for people to know publicly and to hear, especially if these were people who represented the state. They were not just individuals; they were members of organizations and members of communities. So there is this public and political dimension, but at a very practical level, I don't know how you would convince somebody to bring forward that truth that we're looking for unless there's some kind of incentive and protection. Otherwise, not too many people would willingly stand up and say, this is what I did, and then take the punishment, and then their families possibly also suffering as a result. So they try to keep it secret, and that, I think, is tragic, really.
The sad thing for me is that, I worry as the years go by as to whether we will get to a point where we have achieved at least 98% of reconciliation, because I doubt if we will have complete reconciliation and we've closed the chapter.
Well, I mean, that opens up an even bigger conversation. So far you mentioned the word forgiveness, but for me there is a difference between forgiveness and reconciliation. And reconciliation really is this big challenge of how do we find peaceful, dignified ways of living together, even if people are not willing to apologize and forgive. So politically, I think we have still a lot of work to do, partly because of the tragic success of apartheid, that we still live in very separate communities. It's not easy to really find spaces where we can be honest and talk and work together, and really address the socioeconomic legacy of apartheid. I mean, it's almost like I'm cautious now to use the word reconciliation, because many people internationally also, you get this pattern where people who are in positions of privilege or who are in, say, middle class positions, they like to talk about reconciliation and, relationships and dialogue. But people who have been oppressed and discriminated against and who are suffering the structural legacy, they want to address those issues. And the word reconciliation, from that point of view, can become almost like a smokescreen where people are not willing to really address the socioeconomic issues. And for me, that's why reconciliation cannot be separated from social justice. And social justice has also to do with people with privilege, with power, needing to take a creative shared responsibility to do something about the terrible poverty that we still have in our country.
7:30 on SAfm 0891 104 SMSs at 34701. Dr. Verwoed talking to us about the question of reconciliation, accountability and parole for apartheid crimes, and of course the touchy word forgiveness, reconciliation, just separating the two and dealing with each one in its proper sense so that we can make headway. Your calls in a moment.
Check out this F1 app. I turn my smartphone like a steering wheel and just call me Sebastian, baby.
Your name is John.
No, man, like Vettel, the best driver in the world.
Look, one day when you rejoin the real world, okay, you should get a useful app, like the TV licenses app. And then you could do all your TV license stuff from your phone, wherever you are. Just think about all the time you'd save.
Great. More time for me to play with my F1 app. Far away from the real world.
Ugh, I can't win, can I?
The TV License app. Quick, convenient, secure. Available on Apple, Android and Windows 8. TV licenses make a difference.
If your business doesn't have an Opticon PBX system from Telkom Business, your customers are probably used to this sound. Because the average telephone line doesn't have the ability to split one line into two or conference calling facilities. Get an affordable Opticon PBX system for your business with flexible finance options and free maintenance on a rental option. Call 10217, visit telkom.co.za/business or go to a Telkom shop. And you'll see why we're the right business for your business. T's and C's apply.
When you think of the cost of advertising your business on TV or radio, you think... Right? Wrong. The SABC has affordable, tailor-made TV and radio advertising packages to help your small or medium-sized business reach all the right consumers. Join us at the SABC Open Day and we'll show you how. All you have to do is email openday@sabc.co.za and we'll send you the details. Get your business noticed. SABC Advertising.
Umgungundlovu District Municipality, in partnership with Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs KZN, presents the Mandela Day Marathon hosted by KwaZulu-Natal Athletics. Race categories are 10 kilometers, 21 kilometers, and 42.2 kilometers. This historic race is set to take place on the 31st of August 2014 from Imbali Township to the Mandela Capture Site in Howick. The race will be broadcasted live on SABC2. For advertising and corporate packages, contact Lennox on 082-884-2403 or email lennox.mabason@kzncorta.gov.za.
The Talk Show.
27 minutes to 8, news on the hour with the Greg host. Question also asking, if you were to think of all the perpetrators of apartheid crimes, what would it take for you to say they can be set free and they cannot be set free? What is it that works for you? Are you affected directly or indirectly by what you've seen, what has happened to your family member, a friend, someone you know? And what is it? When you look at someone like Eugene de Kock, when you look at someone like Clive W. Lewis and others as well, people can talk about various bombings around the country. They could say maybe this one shouldn't have gotten amnesty, this one shouldn't have gotten parole. What would change it for you? 0891 104 207. Dr. Verwoed, we also worry about history. It looks like at the rate things are going, 20 years into democracy, we're beginning to lose time in terms of recording our history properly, and therefore it'll have gaps which might render us judged harshly.
Yeah, no, I think you open another big theme, and I do know that there are many people who are doing great work trying to capture not just the big stories, but the ordinary stories of people's lives, you know, the Apartheid Archive Project and various others. But I think that is really important, that even with my own parents now and their generation, people in their 80s, I feel the need to sometimes just sit down with them and say, just tell me about your lives, and I'm not going to judge you politically.
Yes.
But I want to understand what you went through, what actually happened in our country that will help me to understand some of the problems we're still facing today. And also to understand how, you know, things don't go away. If people are hurt, if people come with trauma, you know, those things don't go away. I mean, there's somebody who said very wisely, I think, that pain and historical pain which is not transformed is transmitted. And that's become almost a guiding principle in my work, is that it's very important that we address these intergenerational things where, you know, you hear stories from your parents or perhaps from your grandparents or, you know, in the community from older people, and if they're angry, if they're sad, or if they're afraid, or they have stereotypes about other people, those things don't just, you know, disappear into thin air. They become part of the next generation's way of feeling and thinking and looking at the world. And that's why history is so important, and that history really should be inclusive history, not like the history that I grew up with, where we heard about, you know, 26,000 women and children who died in the Anglo-Boer War in the concentration camps, but we never heard about the tens of thousands of black South Africans who also died in those wars. And it's encouraging to see in a place like Bloemfontein how they are updating and expanding the War Museum there to show this bigger picture. That's the kind of history we need, where from all sides people can actually hear the different truths and the different experiences. And in the midst of all that complexity, you know, you can find, you know, a way to learn from it. and not to just repeat the mistakes.
Awesome belief. Jack in Rustenburg, good evening to you. Thanks for calling.
Yes, sir.
Yes, Jack.
Yes, I'm a victim, I have to say that.
Yes.
I really don't know up until today where my mom is.
Sorry to hear that.
I was listening to this program, I was asking myself, should I call and ask or just to put my comment on? I really don't know. I don't know. My brother, as I'm telling you now, I'm standing next to the road. I don't know whether I should cry. I don't know my mother, where my mother is up until today. Since 1973, I don't know. Where did they put it? I don't know, Chief. So, when you have to tell somebody to be released, but at least the bones, just to tell us where she is, so that I should put those bones to peace, so that I should know where she is. But anyway, boss, I really don't know. Should I say I forgive and forget? But each and every Mother's Day, I'm asking myself, where is my mom? I didn't bury her, but she's gone. My sister was 6 months old. Today she is 39 years old. So it's very painful, Chief. I really don't know. That's all I wanted to say. So I'll carry on listening to the radio, what you guys are saying. That's the pain that I'm going through.
Before you go, though, Jack, if you were able to locate where your mom is buried and were able to give a decent funeral, would it make it easy for you to support the release of the apartheid crime committers?
But then I have to be explained, what crime did she commit? That's all.
You would want to know more?
Yes.
For closure?
Yes, please.
I hear you, Jack. I hear you. I feel your pain. I feel your pain. Thank you, Jeff. Drive safely. Let's check. Dr. Verwoed?
Yeah, I mean, that is very painful to hear, that somebody, today is still, and I'm sure, Jack is not the only person. And those are the stories that I sometimes wish more people also in the community where I come from can hear and sit down and really just sit and listen and begin to understand what the impact has been of not just the bigger system, but also those individual stories of people who've been killed, brutalized, families broken up, and the trauma that people are still sitting with. And we need to find ways to listen and acknowledge. And I don't know practically, in this particular case, I don't know enough, but I would hope that there's people, as they get older, even though they might be afraid to come forward, but if they can think the difference they can make to somebody's life, like Jack's life, and even just for their own humanity's sake, the people who still have this information, who might be sitting somewhere and they're hiding it, they've got away with it, nobody knows about it, but they know where those bones are, they know what they did, and if they can just find it in their hearts to get the courage also for their own release of their own humanity, that they can come forward and provide that information so that people can get some kind of closure, I don't know what more to say.
Oh, yeah, I'm just worried. A lot of people, time is running out for them. This is an opportunity to do what's right, to find, I think, closure for themselves as well.
Yeah.
Because it's going to cut both ways.
Well, that to me is the work that I've done with war veterans and with people in different parts of the world who were actively involved in wars, even if they believed in what they did. But that it carries a scar, and if you've hurt other human beings, if you were responsible for killing another human being or even planning it or witnessing it, you can't just walk away from that and still retain your own full humanity. And there's a deep need, I think, for people to face that reality for their own liberation and for the healing and the humanization of the people that suffered at their hands. And there's lots of people out there that I believe would have information and are at the moment, for various reasons, perhaps afraid or still bitter or still believed in what they did. But at that very human level, if you just hear what Jack shared with us, and you can imagine the reality of what he described and think of so many other people in the same position, to find some compassion, some empathy, some humanity to come forward with that information.
Dr. Dr. Wilhelm Verwoed, a pleasure having you. Thank you ever so much for your insights as well. Hopefully your work goes a long way, and somewhere, sometime you'll get the opportunity to talk to other people and just make them aware that, it is important for us to sort this out. I had an SMS that says it's important to forget what happened then and try and fix what is not right now. I wonder if it is that easy. Yeah. Dr. Verwoed, many thanks, and
Thank you.
Please continue with your work. I hope you get more people like you who are looking at it both ways all the time, so that at the end of the day we can find closure and continue to build the country. Many thanks, sir. That's Dr. Verwoed, who worked with the TRC between 1995 and 1998. Coming up next, our next guest is going to chat to us about what is going on in as far as short-term insurance is concerned. The CEO of Unlimited, an insurance company, will find out more, because there was an article in the press talking about some changes, particularly with medical aid schemes, and I tell you, that information boggles the mind, and hopefully Stephen Baxter, in fact, will help us understand all of this. It's 18 minutes to 8.
SAfm brings